Hello, all, and thank you for joining us for the Dyspraxia and Research panel. Today, I am joined by three wonderful individuals from different universities. I will allow everyone to introduce themselves and just explain who they are and where they're from. Before I do that, just so you know, you can share your comments and we will be able to see them. So if you have any questions at all throughout this evening, then do share them. If you are watching through Instagram, it will take us a few moments longer to see your questions, but please do share them through. So let's go ahead. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is David Wright. I work in the School of Psychology at Manchester Metropolitan University. My research focuses on using movement demonstrations to help children with dyspraxia learn motor skills.
Johnny?
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Johnny Parr. I'm in the same university as Dave, so I'm also at Manchester Met University, but I'm in the Department of Sport and Exercise Sciences. I also do a lot of research in dyspraxia, more focused on neuroscientific aspects. So a lot of my research focuses around understanding how the brain controls movement and how that brain activity might be different in individuals with different kind of movement difficulties.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Katherine Moore from Edge Hill University. I'm a PhD researcher there looking at cognitive strengths and challenges in people with a range of neurodevelopmental conditions, which includes dyspraxia. And I'm going to talk to you today about one of my recent studies, which looks at face processing in people with dyspraxia, and also finish off with some strengths that we found in a recent review paper.
Amazing. So our wonderful panelists are going to share some slides with us today to give us a really good insight into their research that we're doing. So up first, we have David. So we're just going to share his screen.
Okay.
There we go. Let me just press the button. Wonderful.
Ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. Hi everyone. Thanks for coming along to listen to this talk today. I'm going to talk about some research that we've done over the last few years where we've been trying to use movement demonstrations to help children with dyspraxia learn everyday movement skills. And then I'm also going to highlight a new website resource that we've developed to allow children and families or professionals who work with those with dyspraxia to access some of our intervention content. The research has been conducted in collaboration with a couple of other colleagues at Manchester Met, Paul Holmes and Greg Wood, and we've also worked really closely with Dr. Sally Payne from the Royal College of Occupational Therapists. She's given a lot of insight and expertise along the way, and all of the work that I'm presenting today has been funded by the Waterloo Foundation. So, I assume people are probably aware that dyspraxia affects around 5 to 6% of children, and it causes movement coordination difficulties that can make it more challenging to perform activities of daily living. So things like shoelace tying, getting dressed, self-care activities can all be more difficult for children with dyspraxia. And the research suggests that just doing physical practice on its own isn't always enough to overcome these movement impairments. And it's therefore being suggested that cognitive strategies might be useful to try and help support skill learning in children with DCD dyspraxia. One cognitive strategy that we focus on is called combined action observation and motor imagery. And this involves watching movement demonstrations while at the same time imagining the feeling of doing the movement in time with video demonstration. So watch and imagine at the same time. And we've done some research over the last few years where we've found that these kind of combined observation and imagery interventions can help children with dyspraxia learn movement skills. We've done a couple of studies, but the one I wanted to talk about today was published just over a year ago in the journal PLOS ONE. And we were trying to see, could a combined action observation and motor imagery intervention help children with dyspraxia learn activities of daily living? And we chose 4 activities of daily living, which you can see on screen. There was shoelace tying, buttoning up a school shirt, using cutlery to chop up some Play-Doh into 4 pieces, and then a cup stacking task where children had to build this 3 pyramid display that you can see on screen using stacking cups. And we wanted to see, could children become better at doing these tasks if they watched some movement demonstration videos that were filmed from a first-person viewpoint, while at the same time trying to imagine the feeling of doing the movements in time with the video. So we recruited 28 children with either confirmed or suspected DCD, all aged 7 to 12 years. And we brought them along to the university, invited them along, and did the MABC Movement Assessment Battery for Children test at the start, and all of the children were at or below the 5th percentile, which is your kind of criteria for a DCD diagnosis. So for the study, we brought everyone along at the pre-test, and we asked them to have 5 goes at each of those 4 tasks. So 5 attempts to tie shoelaces, to button shirt, etc. And for each of the tasks, we recorded the time it took the child to do the task, and we had a technique checklist to measure the technique that the children used. After the pre-test, we then randomized the children into one of 2 groups. One group received our combined action observation and motor imagery intervention, which they followed for a period of 4 weeks. And then the other group did a control activity for the same duration. Both groups had some physical practice as well as the intervention activity. So it was one group got the videos and did some physical practice. One group completed an unrelated task and did some physical practice. And then after 4 weeks, that was all done at home with led by parents. We brought them back to the university for a post-test where we measured them again at those four tasks to see if there'd been any improvement. We then asked them to stop practicing for 2 weeks, and we brought them back again to see if any improvements had been retained by after 2 weeks off. The intervention was as follows. If children were assigned to the observation and imagery group, we showed them some first-person viewpoint videos of a typically developing child model performing the task. So in this case, shoelace tying. They would see a video. This is a screenshot from the video. So they would see a child from a first-person viewpoint tying their shoelaces successfully. And we would instruct them to imagine the feeling of doing the movement whilst they were watching the video. And they would then have a go at physically practicing the task. And that process would repeat. So it would be 1, observe and imagine, have a go at physically practicing, observe and imagine, have a go at physically practicing, etc. If they were in the control group, instead of doing the observation videos, we gave them a game called Cut the Rope on a tablet, which is a little puzzle game where you've got a piece of candy dangling from a rope and you have to swipe with your finger to try and get the candy to land in the frog's mouth down at the bottom. So it's like a fun puzzle game, but it wasn't designed to improve skill performance in any way at the 4 tasks. And those children would have a go at the task of cut the rope, physically practice, play cut the rope, physically practice. And they would do this 10 minutes for each activity, 4 times a week for 4 weeks. And the parents would administer this task with the children, and we kept in regular contact with them over the course of the 4 weeks to check everything was going to plan. For the findings, we found everyone improved at the 4 tasks, regardless of which group they were in. And we think that was because we were asking both groups to do some physical practice. So the physical practice that everybody did brought about some improvements, which was great. But obviously, we were most interested in, would the children who saw the video demonstrations and did the imagery task, would they improve more than the control group? We found that they did, but only on 2 of the tasks. So for shoelace tying and cup stacking task, the video interventions were more effective than the control activity, but there were no differences between the 2 groups for the shirt buttoning task and the cutlery use task. We concluded that it was due to the complexity of those skills. We made the argument that shoelace tying and cup stacking were quite complex skills in that they have multiple different components that have to be linked together in a sequence in order to do it successfully. Shirt buttoning and cutlery use are still complex, but they're the same movement repeated over and over. So the same to button up a shirt is the same movement 8 times, to cut with cutlery was the same movement 4 times. And we think maybe the videos were really beneficial at helping people learn a sequence of different movements. On screen here, you can see an example of one of the graphs. This is from shoelace tying. You can see at the start, everyone's technique was quite similar, but by the post-test and the retention test, the solid black line of the intervention group were performing better than the control group. The other thing that was really interesting from the findings was that the intervention was particularly beneficial for a subgroup of participants who couldn't tie their shoelaces at the start of the study. So we had 18 children who just couldn't tie their laces at all at the very start of the study. And through the randomization process, we ended up with 9 in each group. By the end of the study, 8 out of the 9, so 89% who would use the videos, could tie their laces by the end of the study, whereas only 4 out of the 9, 44%, had learned to tie their laces following the control activities, which was mainly just physical practice. So it seemed that the video intervention was really good, like a true motor learning effect, helping people achieve a task that they couldn't previously do, which we can see displayed on screen here in the bottom right. If you want to see what that looks like in from a behavioural point of view, here's one example video from the pre-test session. And this is a child who had tried on multiple occasions to learn shoelace tying, but hadn't been able to do it. We asked them to try and tie their laces at the pre-test, and you can see they're not really sure what to do. They weren't able to get that initial over and under knot to tighten the laces. And then eventually in a couple of seconds, they kind of give up unsuccessfully. And then in a second, you will see the same child 4 weeks later after watching our videos. You can see they're moving quite quickly and are able to tie their laces successfully. So it was really nice to see that improvement in the children over the course of 4 weeks. We also gathered some feedback from the parents. There's a lot on screen here, so you don't need to read all of it. The stuff on the left-hand side are parent comments, which are generally emphasizing that the video element of the intervention was what seemed to be most effective. So it was the videos that parents thought were helpful rather than the imagery instructions to imagine the feeling of doing the movement. Then on the right-hand side, a lot of these comments are emphasizing that it was the first-person perspective that seemed to be really helpful. So parents seem to think the videos were really helpful because we were showing the movements from the same viewpoint that the children have when they physically perform the task themselves. Whereas in other traditional demonstrations, if someone's opposite you or to the side, it's not the same viewpoint, and you might have to mentally rotate what you're seeing in order to understand what's going on. So following that, we concluded that action observation or combined action observation and motor imagery can be effective for helping children with DCD learn movement skills. But as far as we were aware, there weren't any resources that allowed children and families to access this kind of video intervention content. So we went back to the Waterloo Foundation and acquired some funding to develop an online video library of movement demonstration videos. And this is now live and available, and it's free to use for children and families with either confirmed or suspected DCD, dyspraxia, or for professionals who support children with DCD, whether that's occupational therapists, physiotherapists, or school staff. So what I'd like to do is just show the website now so that people can have a look at it. It's called Watch Me Do It, and the address is scrolling along at the bottom of the screen. And what you see now on screen is the homepage. This has just got some general information. There's a video of me talking about dyspraxia, and there's a video here of Sally Payne talking about why this is a useful resource from an occupational therapy point of view. The main part of the website is this video library, which if I click on here, you can see we've got 27 different skills in total, which we've recorded movement demonstration videos for. And these 27 videos were informed by the dyspraxia community. We did a survey on social media to ask individuals with lived experience of dyspraxia or professionals who support them, what kind of skills do you typically struggle with, or would you like to see some movement demonstration videos made for. And we got a list of about 30, and on the day we were able to record about 27 of them. You can see here that all of the videos from the thumbnails images, they're all recorded from this first person viewpoint. So that matches what we'd used in our research and what the parents were telling us was really helpful. If we click on one of them, so the vegetable chopping one, for example, you'll see that we've got left and right-handed versions of the videos. All of the videos were demonstrated by typically developing child models who were right-handed, and we flipped the video to create left-handed versions of them. So what you see on the screen there are two identical videos that has been flipped to be left-handed, and the idea is that if you're left-handed, you click on the left-handed one and watch it in full screen and see a demonstration of how to perform this task. A little bit of buffering there, hopefully it's coming across okay. Underneath the videos, we've got these instructions for how we want, or how we think people could use the videos. So one option is just to use them as a video demonstration, watch the video and then copy the action. Or second option, people who want it, is that they could add some of those imagery instructions where we encourage them to try and imagine the feeling of doing the movement whilst they watch. We've left it deliberately open-ended so that people can choose whether they would prefer. Some children might find it a bit difficult to imagine the feeling at the same time as watching, so might just do the video demonstration option. Others might try and imagine the feeling, and it's up to them. Underneath that, we've got some top tips for each skill, so some technical points informed by our occupational therapist, Kelly Payne. So things like making an arch over the potato when cutting it to keep the fingers out of the way, safety points like that. Things like that are all tips that Sally would have used when she's working as an occupational therapist. So it's all informed by occupational therapy expertise. And then she was on hand on the day to make sure that the models performed the task using that specific technique that she would use as an occupational therapist. We've also got links to other videos. So if a child is struggling with chopping vegetables, maybe they're also struggling with peeling vegetables, they can click on there and watch our vegetable peeling video. Some issues with the buffering again here. Hopefully they're going to play. Here we go. Oh, maybe not. Okay. I'll go back to the video library. The last couple of things to show would maybe say the shoelace tying one. That's quite a popular one. We've got two options for shoelace tying because there's obviously multiple techniques that can be used for shoelace tying. Hopefully these videos are going to work this time. Seems to be working. So the idea is you could watch the video and follow along. And here's an example of where we used Sally's occupational therapy expertise. So that double over and under wraparound there was informed by Sally to make a more secure, tighter fasten of the shoe. And then the red and yellow laces are also there to make it easier to follow the action. We had some feedback that sometimes it might be difficult to follow along with the speed of the videos. So we've included the option to allow people to slow it down and watch a half-speed video if they want, in case that's more easy to follow. We generally encourage people to watch it in real time, but the option is there if people want to slow it down to make it easier to follow. And then underneath that, we've got the same instructions for how the video can be used and then different top tips for shoelace tying. As well as the videos, we've got a summary of our research, so a brief summary for children of the research work that we've conducted, and then a more detailed summary of some of the neuroscientific research that we've done to inform our observation and imagery instructions, and then a summary of some of the behavioural studies that we've done with children with dyspraxia. And people can click on the links and access the scientific papers if they want to. And then lastly, we've got a contact us page where we're hoping people will give us feedback, tell us if the videos have been useful, or maybe request other skills that they'd like us to develop videos for. And if we got further funding, we might be able to develop those in future. So that's it really for the presentation. I'll just leave the QR code up on screen briefly. As I said earlier, the website is completely free for anyone who wishes to use it. So if we've got children or families with confirmed or suspected dyspraxia watching, feel free to use the website and see if it helps. If there are professionals, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, etc. watching, feel free to use the website with the children that you support. We'd love to hear any feedback, so please feel free to get in touch as well if you use the video and have any comments on it. I think that's it for my talk, so I'll pass back to Crystal.
Amazing. Thank you, David. I'm reading through the comments that we've had across our various platforms, and I am seeing a few occupational therapists saying that it's a really great looking tool, and they're already planning to use it, which is really great to see that influence there. So amazing. Thank you for that. Wonderful. We'll move across to Johnny now. I'll let you have a moment to set your screen up, and if you let me know when you're ready, and I'll share it with everyone. Anyone who's watching live, if you do have any questions you would like to ask, we will have a Q&A panel towards the end, so do pop your comments in and we will be able to see those. Fantastic. Wonderful. You happy for me to share your screen now, Johnny? Yep. Wonderful. Ready when you are. Although we can't hear you. Is your microphone turned on? Hang on, I'll turn your screen off.
I'm back.
Oh, he's back. Okay. You disappeared for a second then. Right, I'll wait for you to put your screen back together. There we go.
Okay, am I in?
Yep, you're in. All good to go.
All right, thanks, Crystal. Yeah, so my name's Johnny Parr. I'm going to be sharing some of the recent research that we've been conducting over the summer, where we're trying to understand more about falls in developmental coordination disorder. So as Dave has already highlighted, and many of you probably know, DCD is a condition which affects the performance of everyday motor skills, and importantly, it's a lifelong condition. So difficulties that individuals with DCD have with everyday tasks persist into adulthood. And importantly, these physical challenges experienced, or the challenges experienced by people with DCD, extend beyond physical challenges and take many other forms. So individuals with DCD have been shown to have difficulties developing social and peer relationships, also reported higher levels of loneliness, anxiety, depression, and lower levels of quality of life. And there is this kind of like vicious cycle where difficulties performing tasks, everyday tasks, seem to cause people to kind of disengage with social and physical activities, which then leads to lower life and so on. And although there's many different tasks which people with DCD struggle with, one of the most important ones is balance and postural control. And that's because being able to control your balance effectively is central to pretty much all tasks that we do daily. So tasks such as walking, navigating everyday environments, avoiding obstacles, brushing your teeth, all the tasks that Dave probably mentioned in his Watch Me Do It videos involve balance to some extent. And because of this, balance is actually a pretty well researched area in DCD. So there's a lot of research that's trying to understand why individuals with DCD struggle with balance, and the reasons seem to be very complex and diverse. So some examples include some deficits to lower limb strength. Also seems to be some difficulties producing consistent movement patterns, which can then result in movements which are a bit more awkward at times and potentially more dangerous when crossing obstacles or trying to place your foot on steps in a safe way. Difficulties of balance seem to be potentially driven by less quality visual control. So obviously when you're navigating a complex environment, it's important to be able to scan your environment to be able to detect threats or things that could become obstacles, because if you view it in a timely manner, you can then position yourself away from anything which could cause you to fall. It seems to be that individual with DCD show some difficulties using vision in that way. There is also some evidence that there's delays in postural responses. So when an individual with dyspraxia faces a sudden loss of balance, there is some evidence that the muscular response to that loss of balance is a little bit slower, which would then put you at a greater risk of subsequently falling. And there are also evidence of impairments to sensory and proprioceptive deficits. So again, if you're trying to maintain your balance on a complex surface, like an uneven ground, it's really important you're able to accurately perceive aspects of what it is that you're in contact with at the floor, so you can kind of navigate the floor safely. And if you have difficulties sensing that information, you're potentially going to be at a greater risk of not engaging with that environment well. So because of all this evidence that balance is something or is a particular difficulty in people with DCD, then it kind of suggests or implies that there's going to be more falls experienced on a daily basis. So if there's kind of more risky walking patterns and poorer scanning of the environment, then you're going to be more likely to put yourself in positions which are going to result in a fall. But what surprised me when I came into this area of research was actually there's very, very few attempts to capture the extent to which falls occur, why they occur, and how much they are affecting the lives of people with DCD. More surprising because there's actually a lot of research in other contexts, so older adults or individuals with cerebral palsy, which has shown that falls themselves can not only cause injuries, but can also have many, many different serious health consequences. So there is some research on this topic. So of the research I could find, there's evidence that children with DCD fall 8 times more than typically developing children, although that was 8 times on average. So there were some children who seemed to report actually not falling that often, but some who seem to report in quite extreme levels of falls. And in a pilot study by Roberts and Purcell, they found that 43% of adults in their study reported falling 10 or more times in the previous 6 months, which is pretty scary when you consider that as you get older, the cost of falling kind of increases and becomes more dangerous. And therefore, unsurprisingly, in a subsequent study, they found that all adults with DCD reported some level of fall-related anxiety, and then subsequently had adapted their daily behaviors to reduce the likelihood of them experiencing a fall. So therefore, it was clear to me that more detailed information about the frequency of falls, why they occur, and the impact they have on the lives with DC was needed. And so to do this, we ran this study over the summer. Maybe some of you listening took part, I hope so. We've tried to develop an online survey for both adults with DCD and also the parents of children with DCD to report on behalf of their children how often falls occur in their cause and the consequences. So to do this, we had a 5-step process of survey development. So we started off with a fairly generic post on the Dyspraxia Foundation Facebook page, which is sadly now gone, where we just sent out a message saying, I think I'll show you in a second actually, so I won't preempt that. After the Facebook post, we then drafted a survey and had it reviewed by an occupational therapist, who was Sally Payne, who Dave mentioned previously, and also Sophie Negus, who was also involved at the Dyspraxia Foundation. The survey was then piloted with 10 participants who had a go at filling out the survey, who then returned for a focus group to give us feedback on the length of the survey, whether the wording was okay, and also gave us some really useful tips on any topics that we overlooked. And then we finally were able to distribute the survey on social media. So this was the Facebook post that we had on the Dyspraxia Foundation site. And this was the first insight that this was a topic that we really should be researching, because within 24 hours we had over 120 comments, and each comment was really quite detailed and a lot of powerful comments, which kind of show that falls are a frequent part of people's lives, and they kind of really have to change their behaviors in response to that. So I'll skip to the response. So what we found. So we actually had a really good response to the full survey. So we actually end up getting 99 parents of DCD children and 86 parents of typically developing children completed the survey. For the adult group, we had 115 adults with DCD complete the survey and 86 typically developing adults complete the survey. So I'll start on the frequency of falls in children. So what we found was that 27% of children were reported to fall at least 3 or more times per week. So maybe that isn't too surprising, because, you know, children do fall quite a lot. But when you compare that to the typically developing children, only 4% reported to fall as frequently as the DCD group. 25% of the DCD children were also reported to experience at least 5 near falls per week, compared to only 2% of typically developing children. And for those who reported more than 5 near falls a week, we allowed them the opportunity to tell us kind of more specifically how often they're experiencing these falls. And some of the comments included several times a day, 10 times a day, 5 times a day, and so on. So it was quite clear that, you know, children with DCD are falling a lot, and they're experiencing near falls frequently within a single day. And the trend carried over to adults. So for the adults who completed the survey, although generally the total number of falls seemed to be lower, 25% of DCD adults reported to fall at least once a week. And when you consider there's 52 weeks in a year, that means there's potentially 52 falls experienced by DCD adults across a year. And again, that's pretty scary when you consider that as we age, the cost or risk of what a fall can cause health-wise becomes increasingly more dangerous. And 74% of DCD adults experienced at least one near fall a week. So being able to recover from a loss of balance is obviously very, very important for the aging DCD population. And again, for some of the specific comments we got, the numbers seem to be quite extreme. Some adults reported to experience 20 near falls a day, 15 near falls a day, and so on. So the causes of falls. So for this, I've decided to group the responses for the children and adults together, because the findings were fairly consistent. For both seem to report that the biggest causes were uneven ground, busy crowds or environments, and also going up or down steps or stairs. A lot of respondents also mentioned mental fatigue as something which kind of increases the likelihood of falling, along with distractions and multitasking. And another cool thing that came out from our focus groups and Facebook, so it wasn't something we were initially going to include in the questionnaire, was this idea of spontaneous falls. So a lot of people highlighted that they often fall without any reason, without knowing at all why they did. A lot of people mentioned they trip on thin air, and a lot of people saying that they trip on their shadow. So what are the consequences of falls? So for children, again, like the adults, they are falling a lot. They're experiencing a lot of near falls as well. 30% reported that falls caused them embarrassment and low self-esteem, with feelings of clumsiness, inadequacy, or inferiority. 35% reported emotional responses such as being upset, frustrated, angry, or even depressed. And 20% of respondents mentioned avoidance of participating in activities or withdrawal from social interactions. And again, the trend was fairly similar in adults. So as high as 80% of respondents reported they were at least moderately worried about falling on a daily basis. 40% reported avoiding specific activities to prevent the likelihood of falls in their daily life, and 15% reported experiencing social anxiety about falling in public. And again, I think these might be a bit long-winded, but I'll put them up anyway. So these are some individual responses that we had. So at the top here, you can see someone said that when they fall, they feel extremely embarrassed and the fear of falling is constantly present. Another respondent said, embarrassing. It's become what I'm known for. The first thing people are often told about me is when I fall over. And two of these respondents here, which I think are really interesting, mentioned the worry about getting older. So one respondent said, I'm scared I'll fracture my hip or neck when I get older. And this other respondent said, I worry about the future because when I'm older, the risk of injury will be greater, but I can't access support for falls. Oh yeah, and also I haven't included the same information for the child respondents, but for the adults, as many as 44% of respondents highlighted that they have at some point experienced a break or fracture directly from a fall, and 79% have experienced sprains or strains. So it seems that these falls are not only frequent, they are causing serious injuries and therefore to some extent a burden on the healthcare system. So I'm not sure how long I've been, but so in summary, right, this questionnaire goes a long way to showing that falls are not only highly prevalent in both children and adults with DCD, but they seem to be having a significant impact on aspects of well-being. So it's kind of evident to us that research is specifically focused on fall prevention is needed, or to continue the work that's already been done in that area, especially given the aging DCD population. So I'll put aging because I'm not trying to call people DCD old, but the awareness of DCD is kind of growing year by year, which means that as the years go by, there's going to be a lot more people diagnosed with DCD getting into their 40s and 50s. So we need to be able to kind of help those prevent falls in the work that we do going forward. So just to finish on some good news, so we are planning soon to continue our fall related research in Manchester. So we're going to run a study soon to look at how the brain controls a sudden loss of balance in adults with DCD. So this is great news for us because there actually is an underrepresentation of adult DCD research. And the study will involve you standing on a treadmill rather than a platform like this. So it'll be a little bit safer. And you will basically be stood on a treadmill that moves slightly. And we're interested in measuring how your brain responds to a sudden loss of balance, and then how we can understand full risk from how your brain responds. If you want to take part, we're able to offer you £50 for taking part and potentially cover some of your travel costs. And a really important part of this study is that we want to join our patient and participant involvement group. So we want to kind of increase how present people with lived experience of dyspraxia are in the design of our studies. So if you're interested in helping us with that, feel free to contact me. So if you want to be part of the PPIE group or take part in the study, my details are on there. We've also got another Facebook page, which you can contact us on. Yes, so I think that's all, Crystal. I've got no idea how long I've been.
That's okay. I'll turn your screen off. Amazing. Thank you so much. That was a really interesting insight. And yeah, I agree. That's a part of dyspraxia, DCD, that we don't really hear much at all about. So that's really, really great that you're researching into that. And that is a fantastic insight. We'll move over to Katherine in a moment. Just again, I want to remind anyone who's watching, if you do have any questions, we will have a Q&A session towards the end once Katherine has shared her slides with us. Katherine, if you want to get your slides ready and let me know when you're happy for me to pop them on the screen for you.
Okay. Can you see those, Crystal?
I can see it, yeah.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yes, wonderful. There you are. When you're ready, Katherine.
Okay, brilliant. So thank you very much. For anybody who missed it earlier, my name's Katherine Moore and I'm a PhD student at Edge Hill University. I'm going to present some of my research today, both looking at face recognition in people with dyspraxia, and then I'm going to move on to talk a little bit later about the strengths that we found in people with dyspraxia as well. So this research has been done in collaboration with my supervisors, Dr. Edwin Burns and Professor Jeff Beattie. And the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was the headline, really, if you will, that we found 56% of people with dyspraxia also met the criteria for prosopagnosia, which is a neurodevelopmental condition affecting face recognition. So it seems important to just take a little bit of time to talk about what prosopagnosia is. So as I say, it's a lifelong neurodevelopmental condition in a similar way to dyspraxia. So in everyday life, people with prosopagnosia might struggle to recognise their parents, their teachers, caregivers, romantic partners, friends, colleagues, or even their own children. And instead, they tend to rely on other features like haircuts, clothing. So if they see somebody out of context, or somebody has a haircut or changes their makeup or something, it can be very easy for people to suddenly not recognise others at all. The guys have already talked quite a bit about what dyspraxia is, so I won't go over that other than to say that we know that dyspraxia affects movement and coordination amongst lots of other things as well. So we found it interesting that in both dyspraxia and prosopagnosia, people report and display secondary issues with social avoidance and social anxiety. And that makes sense, especially in relation to what Johnny was just talking about with tripping and falling. If you know that you're likely to go out and have a fall or knock things over, it's understandable that for some people, not maybe everybody, but for some people that could cause anxiety and embarrassment. And similarly in prosopagnosia, if you are going to go to your work's Christmas do and then you get there and you're not going to recognise your boss, for example, or if you go to a party and you can't recognise your friends, it might really offend them. So these both of the conditions impact and limit education and employment and social outcomes quite drastically. So for these and other reasons which are detailed in the published paper, we wanted to find out if there might be a link between prosopagnosia and dyspraxia. So we conducted a series of different tests, which I'll briefly talk through now. Because of COVID-19 and because the PhD was planned within COVID-19 restrictions, all of our data was collected online. So our reviewers suggested that we call our group a probable DCD group, which is absolutely fair. We used the adult and adolescent coordination questionnaire, the AACQ, in combination with the adult dyspraxia checklist to determine our DCD group. People told us they had DCD or thought they had DCD, and we verified that using these methods. So the AACQ, for example, asks questions of people like, I have difficulties with preparing a light meal, applying cosmetics, loading the dishwasher, putting on earrings or tying a tie. So these things all relate to the diagnostic manual, the DSM-5, which are criteria for dyspraxia. So we tested 32 probable dyspraxic participants. I will refer to them from now on as dyspraxic participants because I think that's just a little bit easier for the purposes of the presentation. And 37 age and gender matched controls who confirmed to us that none of them had neurodevelopmental conditions, any of them. And then we also asked everybody, that was on a scale, so people completed that and said that they experienced that never through to always. And then we asked people to then complete the prosopagnosia index, which is a self-report questionnaire, which has 20 questions, all about face recognition. And that example questions of that are: my face recognition ability is worse than most people. I have always had a bad memory for faces. And I feel like I frequently offend people by not recognising who they are. So again, you can see how that would link into the social anxiety and so on. And we used the Burns Convention, Burns 22 Convention, which suggests that on the PI20, the recommended cutoff is anybody scoring 60 or above, and also indicated that they had trouble with faces using a separate question which asked them if they had lifelong difficulty recognising people that they feel they should know. And we use that to identify the presence of prosopagnosia. So what we found was that dyspraxic participants reported significantly higher levels of face recognition difficulties than our controls. And you can see here on this graph that there is quite a big difference in those scores there. This is on the PI20. Okay. What we wanted to do then was identify whether these problems with face recognition were being caused by perception difficulties, which is sort of the earlier stage of face recognition. So when you see a face, are you processing that correctly? Is the perception there? So we use the Cambridge Face Perception Test, which I haven't actually included in the slides, but I do just want to let you know that that early stage of face perception, we did find a significant difference between our control group and our dyspraxic group. So we know that at that early stage, people are struggling with recognising or processing faces. And then we moved on to the Cambridge Face Memory Test, which tells us subsequently, after they struggle with this, it makes sense that then they would struggle to recognise new faces and also faces of people that they should know. So we use the Cambridge Face Memory Test and we use the Famous Faces Test. So I'm going to show you those and you can have a little bit of a go. So you've been probably looking at this guy for a little while now. We had 72 trials that we presented our participants with that looked very much like this. In the middle of the screen, one face forward, one slightly to the left and one slightly to the right. And then they were presented with 3 faces, one of which was the target face and 2 of which were novel faces. So I'm going to give you a chance now to see if you can work out which one it was. If you said this guy here on the right, you are absolutely correct. So that was the Cambridge Face Memory Test. So that checks if people can recognise unfamiliar faces. And what we found was that people with dyspraxia scored significantly fewer correct trials on the CFMT than controls. And you can see that here again on this graph. Okay. So then we moved everybody onto the Famous Faces Test, which most people find quite fun. Although anybody who has prosopagnosia can find this a little bit stressful. So obviously here we have Rowan Atkinson. We presented people with 30 faces, famous faces, and they were in the middle of the screen, and underneath they were asked to type into a text box the name of the person or a distinguishing description of the person, and for every right answer they got 1 point. So we've got Rowan Atkinson, so if you'd said Mr. Bean or Blackadder or Johnny English, then they would get 1 mark each for those. So other faces that we included were people like Her Majesty the Queen and Daniel Radcliffe. Okay, and what we found here again was that the dyspraxic participants scored significantly lower, again for famous faces, so faces that people think that they should know, than controls. So in conclusion, as I say, we found 56% of people with dyspraxia in our group met the criteria for prosopagnosia diagnosis. We found that the problems with face recognition occur at every stage of face processing, so that initial stage and then the subsequent memory stages as well. And we found that dyspraxia has a high comorbidity at the same rates as you would expect in possibly autism, which is sometimes reported around about 50%, and same with ADHD. So our recommendations based on this are that people with dyspraxia and professionals who support them, so everybody probably who's watching this evening, hopefully should be more aware that people with dyspraxia might struggle with faces and face recognition. And also that future diagnostic or screening tools should consider this large overlap, and we would recommend that if somebody's being screened for dyspraxia or for prosopagnosia, that perhaps they should also be screened for the other as well. Okay, if anybody feels that they want some more support in regards to prosopagnosia after seeing this or in the future, we recommend this website, faceblind.org. It's a great site for children and also for adults. The NHS now also has a page that's dedicated to prosopagnosia. We do have people contacting us saying that the GP just doesn't recognise prosopagnosia, doesn't know what it is. And that's, I think, similar to people's experiences with dyspraxia as well. But we would recommend that you perhaps go back to them and ask them to refer you to a neurologist for brain scans to just rule out any other potential causes of face blindness or prosopagnosia, some people prefer. And if the GP doesn't know what you're talking about, the medical read code, just for some advice for prosopagnosia, is F481M. So you can share that with them and quote that as well. Okay, so that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of that particular study, but I think it's important to share that. But I also wanted to highlight the findings from my recently published review paper, which, as I said earlier, identified cognitive strengths and skills in 7 neurodevelopmental conditions, which included dyspraxia. So I wanted to share some of those strengths. I want to just say, actually, before I start, that it's important to note that just as with the challenges of dyspraxia, there's going to be individual differences, and not everyone will have all of these. But I do think that looking at the strengths alongside difficulties is really important in helping to reduce the stigma and the stereotypes around neurodiversity, and also specifically dyspraxia. So the first one I wanted to talk to you about is a little bit interesting, because risk aversion is often reported in dyspraxia as a problem. So people in the literature and in books and so on will often say that children, for example, with dyspraxia hang back and observe rather than getting involved, specifically in things like PE and physical activity. But in our paper, we reposition this as a potential strength, because the world and our species needs people who will physically get stuck in, but we also need people who are going to run away from danger when we need to, and those who will observe and make considered decisions. So if people with dyspraxia are tending towards observing rather than going to get stuck in, then that can be a great trait to have generally. But it can also be useful in employment where a careful and considered approach is needed in a particular job. I mention employment because I went to a recent event about neurodiversity in the workplace and business, and I became aware that about 7 out of 10 people with neurodivergent conditions are not in paid employment at the moment in the UK. So I think this is another really important reason why looking at strengths is so vital for the community. So another strength that we found was creativity, which I just want to touch on quickly. And this ranged from writing fictional stories, composing music, art, drama, and many other things. And again, I think this is really important, but whether people engage with creative activity for pleasure or for creative enterprise and work, it's just a key skill to have, not least because dyspraxia is associated with a greater risk of mental health difficulties. And being creative is a great way to really get lost in something and enjoy yourself. So being creative has huge benefits and is a great strength to have, so it should be celebrated. Our research also suggested that people with dyspraxia are particularly good at embracing diversity and attuning to others. So from an employment point of view, that's really a great strength to have, as equality, diversity and inclusion roles are increasingly valuable to companies in HR, etc. And then I'm going to put these last 3 together because it might sound a little bit odd to put them together, but empathy, resilience and determination, and laughter and humour all seem to be things that were reported as a result of the daily difficulties that people had from childhood, with things that other people just took for granted. So somebody reported to me that as a child they would be made to stay inside until they'd done their coat up whilst all the other children were playing outside, and that had built resilience and determination. I don't advocate for that, but I do see that is a really positive thing that has developed as a result of the difficulties. And same with empathy. People report that when they have had to overcome a lot of things themselves, they're more empathetic towards other people going through different things, and that laughter and humour has been a great tool to help keep them going, and also can be used as a real strength as well. So it's really important to think about your own strengths, I would say, and if you're working with people with dyspraxia, maybe have them make lists because I think that's a great way to boost self-esteem. And I wanted to just share the link there for the paper, because you can have a look at the strengths in other neurodevelopmental conditions as well. This link is not behind a paywall, so it's accessible to everybody. So I just want to say thank you very much for listening. And does anybody have any questions?
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. For those watching as well, that link that was on the screen just now is scrolling at the bottom in a slightly shorter form. And as Katherine said, it's not behind a paywall, so it's a really interesting read if you do have the chance to do that. And please do also check out Johnny and David's website when you have the chance. I'm going to move over to questions now. We've had a few questions come in. So one of the first questions I'm going to have, which I think is aimed towards you, Johnny, because this came about just after you shared with us your research project for participants. Quarter Chicken, fantastic name, has asked, do we need an official diagnosis? I think this is in reference to participation.
Yeah, I think that's my Nando's order, quarter chicken. Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's not something we've worked out yet, because we typically do child research, and for that we often open it up to individuals who are yet to get a official diagnosis, and then we'll do some screening, and then if you fall within the criteria, we'll put you down as being part of the dyspraxic group. Because there isn't as much research into dyspraxic adults, I am not too sure yet if the problems that we'll face of taking the same strategy of allowing individuals who suspect to have DCD to take part. My initial thoughts are that initially we probably will restrict it to anyone who's got an official diagnosis, because this is only a small initial pilot study where we're trying to so we're not actually after like a massive amount of people, like 10 or 12 for the dyspraxic group. So at this point we'll probably restrict it to official diagnosis, but maybe not. So if you want to get in touch with me, email me and I'll send over the information. I'll keep you in the loop. I've got a bit of like an email list of people involved in our research. So if you want to be part of that update, email me and I'll let you know, basically.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think this one is potentially for you, David. Hopefully that comes up on screen. Yes. So Dyspraxia Dialogues has asked, I think in relation to the videos, I would say some dyspraxic people would potentially find visual demos overwhelming. Are there written/audio instructions to go with them just in case?
It's a good question. We've got some, the top tips underneath that I showed have got some kind of technical points for each skill. So we've got those as kind of guidelines that could be used as some written instructions, but they're perhaps not as detailed as the person might be hoping for. We didn't include any audio instructions on top of it, primarily because for a couple of reasons. First, we wanted to keep the videos free of any audio or written commentary on the screen, partly because people might be using them as the video movement demonstration option, and other people might be using them as the imagery instruction. So because we had like a dual focus to the videos, we didn't want to include any instructions on there. And we were also hoping that the videos and the website could be used in multiple languages, so we didn't want to add any audio on top of the videos that then might not be understandable if people don't have English as a first language. So yeah, that's maybe not the most positive answer that I can give, but that's the rationale for it.
Thank you for that. This next question has popped up over on Instagram, so I can't pop it on screen, but I shall read it out. It's something I've not come across before, so I don't know if either of you have. Someone has asked if there's a potential link between dyspraxia and pigmentary mosaicism. Pigmentary mosaicism? Any thoughts on that? I've not come across it before as a link.
I'm not familiar with it.
Same for me. Not heard of it
No,
before.
unfortunately not.
No, I think it's probably safe to say there's either not much of a link or there's not really any research into that at the moment. It's the first time I've come across it, so I thought I'd ask just in case. But yeah, sorry we can't answer that one, unfortunately. Next on list of questions before we finish up for today. Do dyspraxia researchers communicate with one another regularly?
Yeah. My experience is that the dyspraxic. Sorry, my dog's just come in the room. It's really annoying me. Sorry. My experience from the dyspraxic research community is pretty positive. So we go to like Dyspraxia UK conference, and it's pretty good. So we often have like occupational therapists involved in our work. We're trying to drive more PPIE in our work as well. So we're trying to make sure that our research is kind of driven by people with lived experience. So I personally think that it's a fairly good community of research in dyspraxia.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we regularly meet up at conferences and speak to each other in between as well. So I think I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd echo that. We've got there's a UK-based conference that takes place every 2 years, and then an international conference that runs in the alternate one. So there's like every year there'll be some opportunities at conferences to meet up and communicate with each other, and everyone's kind of working towards the same goal of trying to make life better for people with dyspraxia. So people generally quite open and quite supportive and sharing of ideas at these kind of events.
I'm a panel member on the DCD RAG group, which is the kind of UK research panel which connects the universities together. And from the conversations I'm involved in, there is a lot of connection there, which is really good, because I know some people worry about that. Are we all communicating with one another? So it's really great that is happening, not just within the UK, but kind of globally as well. Next on questions is, what limitations do you experience within research?
Well, just to go off the back of my presentation, the main limitation I think that I've seen so far in dyspraxia is the absence of adult DCD research. So a lot of what, at least again, I can't speak for all DCD research, but the stuff that we focus on is typically interest in like motor control, how movements are controlled, how vision's used, and so on. And often there's a big bias towards children, but along with falls, these problems persist throughout life. So there's going to be a need to kind of build up that adult DCD research base.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. I think as well, we're looking at research with dyspraxic participants in adulthood. There isn't an agreed upon movement battery as such, so I think that's quite a big limitation. One of the reasons why I had to use online information. Obviously there was COVID, but also there is no agreed upon movement battery, so I think that's quite a big limitation in adult research with dyspraxia at the moment.
My only other thing to add to it would perhaps be around funding. We've had a lot of really great support from the Waterloo Foundation. They fund a lot of really good research into dyspraxia and DCD, but it's not something that some of the larger funding organisations necessarily fund as much, partly because I think it's not given as much awareness as things like autism, ADHD and other disabilities. So whilst there is funding out there, I think it's limited compared to other conditions, which is a shame.
I think it's quite evident from what you've discussed that research is going to continue, but just to kind of ease the minds of our community, especially after the closure of the Dyspraxia Foundation, there's been a lot of anxiety within the community that dyspraxia awareness and research is going to be affected by that. Would you say that there's any kind of barriers in place, or is everything still going to continue?
I think the events you've put on this week are evidence that the community is strong enough to kind of keep that part going. From our side, our research is actually I think it's getting bigger and bigger, dyspraxia research. So I've got no worries at all that the dyspraxia research is going to fade off. Only positive things, I think.
Yeah, I second that. I think the more research is done, the more research questions are generated, and I think we're still very early days, and I think I don't think it's going anywhere.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We've got more and more people showing an interest in it from a student point of view, with people wanting to do projects in it for their dissertations and things like that. So the interest seems to be there. So I'm sure research will continue.
And I'll just add to that as well. This because the research continue. And we want to develop this kind of PPIE. We want people with lived experience to contribute to our research. So it's really important to us, and hopefully to people with dyspraxia, to have your say in what we do. So do reach out if you can, and be part of our team, because there's growing movement towards doing research that reflects the needs of the people who you're researching. So we need the input from the community on that front.
Very well said, Johnny. Thank you very much. Well, that concludes our evening today. Thank you very much for everyone who's tuned in and asked us questions. If you had any more questions that we haven't been able to answer, please do reach out to either David, Katherine, or Johnny, or Dyspraxia Magazine where appropriate. And I'm sure they'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions. And thank you again, all three of you, for joining us today. Your insights have been magnificent. Great value, and continue your fantastic work. So with that, I guess we'll say goodbye. Have a lovely evening.